Meeting of the Planning Committee held on the 4th of February 2025. The following members are present: Councillors Ali Callison, Ralph Barker, Arch Buchanan, Ross Clark, Jerry Convery, Margaret Cowie, Maureen Devlin, Colin Dewar, Mary Donnelly. Apologies from Councillor Joe Fagan. Councillors Alistair Fulton and Shalene Handybode are present. Councillor Graham Horn is not present. Councillors Carl Johnston Dempsey and Ross Lambie are present. Councillor Martin Lennon is not present. And the following members are present: Councillors Leslie MacDonald, David McLachlan, Richard Nelson, Norman Ray, John Ross, Graham Scott, David Shearer, Helen Toner and David Watson. Thank you, and I'll pass you back to the Chair for today's business.
Thank you very much, Stuart. We'll move into today's agenda. Agenda item number 1 then is any declarations of interest. Councillor David Shearer.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, that's fine, yep.
Yep. Declaring an interest in item 3 and 5. I've been involved in discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shearer. I'll ask you just to leave the meeting when we're going to discuss those items. Is there any other further declarations of interest? If there are no further declarations of interest, then Councillor Mary Donnelly, please.
Been involved in application 9 that has come before us before. So should I declare an interest and leave the meeting?
Councillor Donnelly, that's for you to take the test yourself. I can't tell you what to do. That's not within my gift to do that. It's entirely up to you as how you see that test to be, if you think you have influenced anything, but that's for you to decide.
It's just individual constituents have spoke to me, so I will declare an interest, and that way I'm keeping myself safeguarded. Thank you.
Thank you. That's noted, Councillor Donnelly. I'll ask you just to leave the meeting just when we come to speak to that. Okay, we'll move into agenda item number 2 then, is the minutes of the previous meeting. These are submitted for approval as a correct record, and these are pages 5 to 10. I'll move that as a correct record.
I'll second it.
Anyone otherwise minded? All agreed? Thank you. Agenda item number 3, I intend to take item 3 and item 5 together, although I'll take decisions separately, but I'll ask Fraser to present agenda item 3 and 5 together. And these are applications P230619, pages 11 to 16 and pages 29 to 34 in your pack, and that's the application for installation of air source heat pumps. And these are retrospect at plot 23 Waterlands Road, Law in Kidlook, and I'll ask Fraser just to present those both items. Thank you. Councillor Shearer's left, so I'll ask Fraser just to present now.
Thanks, Chair. As you say, applications P230619 and P231183 relate to a relatively new residential development located on the edge of Law Village. In both cases, the installation of an air source heat pump did not take place in accordance with the approved plans for the original residential development, and following enforcement inquiries, planning applications were sought seeking consent in retrospect for the apparatus. 15 letters of objection and 1 in support were submitted in relation to the application 0619, while application 1183 received 10 letters of objection and 2 in support, with the key issues being raised in relation to the noise from the apparatus when it is in use. In this context, both sites have been visited by environmental services on several occasions, and readings have been taken that indicate that the noise from the apparatus is at an acceptable level. This being the case, it is considered that the retrospective submissions do not raise any adverse planning issues, and the recommendation for the applications P23619 and P23183 is to approve.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments on both agenda items. If you please indicate now. Councillor David Watson, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just a bit of clarity here about 10.9, and it states that following further noise complaints, Environmental Services later requested a noise impact assessment in support of the proposal, but this was never submitted. Surely if our Environmental Services or planning is asking for a report, we should be making sure that they're submitted. Is there a reason why this has been accepted, that somebody doesn't submit something after being requested? And I know that Environmental Services did revisit the site, but surely the crux of this is if we ask for something to be included as an authority in an application, it should be included.
Fraser?
Yeah, no, I think it's right that we did ask for the assessment, Councillor, and that the applicants weren't able to provide that information. Subsequent to that, though, Environmental Services did go out on a number of occasions and carried out their own assessment of it. And at each of the occasions when they were visiting, there wasn't anything that would constitute a statutory noise nuisance around it. I agree, it would have been, we'd have got a quicker decision probably around this one if we'd got the information from the applicants in advance, but having carried out that assessment by our own officers, there was nothing that would lead us to a recommendation of them to approve this one.
Councillor Watts, can I just ask you just to turn your mic towards your mouth a wee bit more? Perfect, thank you.
I hear what Fraser's saying, but I think there's a principle here that if we're asking for something and it's not included, maybe we shouldn't actually be deciding on an application. It's costing us an authority for Environmental Services to go out when we're asking somebody else to provide that report. So more a comment than anything, but I think in future we should be taking that on board. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Watson, I'll make sure that's noted. Councillor Clark, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Most of my concerns have been raised by Councillor Watson and then answered. So, Fraser, you're saying that the applicant could not or didn't submit a impact assessment. Was there a reason given for not doing so? And I know you have further explained, after officers visiting the site, so there's nothing extra that could be gained or any other information that could be gained about the impact by an impact assessment as opposed to what officers have done since then?
Yeah, I would say, no, I think it would be more appropriate to say that they did not submit. They were citing the cost that's involved in doing the noise impact assessment themselves around that. There was ongoing complaints that were coming in terms of the planning position, but as well as through Environmental Services for the noise aspect of it. That's why Environmental Services officers went out and visited it. They went out and looked at it on a number of occasions and carried out that noise assessment. So while that fed then into the planning process in terms of that decision, if there had been any issue that had been picked up by the Environmental Services on their visits, the action would have been taken through environmental legislation. There'd be nuisance legislation that would be taken that way, but there was no action that they'd identified that they could take. So therefore, it left us in the position where there was no overriding objection to the planning application. So while it would have been helpful if the applicant had given us that information in advance, because of the other investigation that was carried out by officers, it came to the conclusion that there was no planning reason to resist these two applications, hence the reason it's presented to members today.
Thank you, Fraser. Any further questions or comments then, please? If there are no further questions or comments, we'll take agenda item number 3 first, as P230619. I will move the recommendation to grant.
I'll second it.
All agreed? Thank you. Agenda item number 5 then is application P231183. The recommendation is to grant. I will move to grant.
I'll second it.
All agreed? Thank you. We'll invite Councillor Shearer back into the meeting before we move to agenda item number 4. Thank you very much. Councillor Shearer has now rejoined the meeting, so we'll move to agenda item number 4 then, please, is application P230927. These are pages 17 to 28. It's installation of a battery storage facility and associated infrastructure, 3 Leadhill Road, Elvenfoot and Biggar. And Fraser to represent, please.
Thanks, Chair. This application relates to a site of some 2.8 hectares that sits on either side of the B7040 Lead Hills Road. The proposal involves the development of a 9.8 megawatt energy storage facility that would comprise of 8 battery containers and associated apparatus. A supporting statement has been provided by the applicant indicating that there is a scheduled grid connection to the battery facility that is related to the nearby Elvenfoot substation, which is being extended. No objections have been submitted by the technical agency who were consulted on this application, but objections have been submitted from residents in the surrounding area, including a number submitted to members since committee papers were published. Section 7 provides a summary of the representations, while full details are available on the Council portal. Section 10 sets out the assessment of the application in terms of the development plan, material planning considerations and the representations received. And overall, it is concluded that the proposal accords with the relevant provisions of the Local Development Plan and the National Planning Framework. With regard to the details of the proposal, given that the development is acceptable in planning policy terms, the potential impact of the energy storage system on the residential properties in areas can be mitigated by the imposition of conditions which relate to issues such as noise, protection of the natural environment, archaeology, roads, access, both during construction and in the operational use of the facility. So therefore, for the reasons set out in section 12 of the report, and subject to the conditions on pages 24 to 27, it is recommended that application P230927 should be approved.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments. Councillor Ross Lambie, please.
Chair, and thanks, Fraser. There's aspects of the application that I welcome, which is that it's adjacent to an existing substation, which seems like a logical place for these kind of developments, that you're adding on to existing infrastructure in the area. And it's, in terms of size, this one's fairly modest relative to other applications we've seen. So it all sort of ties in, and I agree with the recommendation. The only question really was, for most of these BESS applications, they're allowed to build them in the green belt because they're regarded as essential infrastructure. And in the report on page 22, 10.5, the justification of it is that Scottish ministers regard some of the BESS developments as essential infrastructure. And that, I've seen that comment a few times on these applications. I just wonder if there's further detail on that. When are we able to identify that something is truly essential, or it's arguably speculative profit agenda behind it? I just wonder if there's any more detail on that aspect of it. But yeah, I do actually think it's an appropriate location for this type of thing. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Lambie. Yeah, I think the issue here in terms of that there is a connection that's been shown to the grid. There has been recent decisions that were brought to the Planning Committee for BESS facilities where, from the information provided us, they do appear a lot more speculative. In terms of this proposal here, they've indicated there's an assessment to the grid. There has been suggestions about other locations where it could be within the area here, but we have to consider the application as presented to us. And in terms of our assessment against the technical considerations, planning policy, it's seen as if this is acceptable.
Great. Thanks, Fraser.
Thank you. Councillor Ralph Barker, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that explanation. It really starts from even the site address given to this committee. 290 metres north-northwest of 3 Lead Hills Road, Elvenfoot. That is misleading, and I would actually say it's deliberately misleading. Even the drawing provided to this committee doesn't show the details. So really the committee can't really decide without those details. So in particular, I make it that the site boundary for the BESS is 50 metres from the nearest residence, which I don't think is number 3. Now, the actual containers are a bit further away, but we don't know that at this committee because we're not being shown that. Neither is the cable lead into it shown. The cable lead actually comes in from the west, and the west is where this facility should be built. What my recommendation would be is that the committee goes back to the applicant and to find a more acceptable location further away from the residential properties, or alternatively bring clear evidence that there is no alternative to this site. I well imagine that this site has just proved financially convenient. I do have to say as well that in their public meetings, the drawings they showed actually just kind of missed off the nearest residential property. So that's my recommendation. Go back to the applicant. Failing that, I would move an amendment to refuse.
Thank you. Fraser, do you want to just come in just on that point, that recommendation, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Barker.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. In terms of the site address, Councillor Barker, that's the one that's actually generated by the GS system, which comes through the Scottish Government's portal for registering planning applications. So that identifies a specific location. So it's that's the planning authority that actually generates an address. It's just something that we need to use as a locational thing to actually put it onto our GIS system that allows then the application to be assessed and the details of it to be investigated. In terms of the site plans that are all available, that are on the actual planning portal, which members are always advised, and we know that they do look at in advance of the planning committee meetings. It does have the location of where the the storage facility itself would be on the site. It does indicate where the site boundaries are. There is 2 sites that sit on either side of Elvenfoot Road. We, though, have to take and consider the planning application as presented to us on this. We have to consider the proposal. It's not a matter for the planning service to pick on another site that we think could be better around this. It's for the planning authority to make the decision on what's presented. In terms of what was presented to us, the statutory consultees have all been engaged in this process and there's not been any objections. It's been submitted to us around this. So there hasn't been a reason. There's nothing that's provided in terms of any comments we were back from anyone to lead to a recommendation other than approval on the application as presented. But certainly in terms of the idea that it's a misleading address, that's not the case around it. And it's the application as presented that we need to make a decision on today.
This committee is not bound by that. We can see that the best application at 50 metres from the nearest residential property is not acceptable. And I move recommendation to refuse and look for a seconder.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barker. Yes, I'll come back to you just on the planning grounds of why that refusal was. If you just give me a wee second or two, I'll come back to you just for that reason. I'll bring in Councillor Alec Allison and then we'll look to see if you've got a seconder as well.
Thanks, Chair. Fraser, just looking for a little bit more clarity around some of this. We've had a number of these types of applications coming in for battery storage, and basically it is an essential service that's required if we're working off wind farms in particular, where the supply is not always in line with the demand in terms of power. But you're right, in the past we have been concerned about the lack of guidance being given by the Scottish Government. Has that changed? And within ourselves, what are our parameters for the siting of these. I mean, in the past we have turned them down because, well, in my humble opinion, a lot of it was because of how close housing was, although some of them were in the green belt as well. And I'm not just quite sure how all that ties in to this application, because it is houses close to this. And finally, is this detailed planning, so therefore the batteries, are they indicative of where they'll be sat in the site, or is it full planning and they are actually where they are asking for them to be sited?
Taking the last point first, no, it's full detailed planning consent, so it's the drawings as submitted and approved, which would show the location of where the actual batteries would be, where the pipe connection would be and the like as well. Regarding the initial caveat I would always put in, and this, we say this on a number of occasions, every application has to be treated on its own merits. But as in terms of precedent that exists maybe with this committee here, previous applications that have been refused have been in the Greenbelt, and they've also been ones that have been refused which are in strategic economic locations. So there was a policy consideration which led to recommendations for refusal on them. This type of facility is seen as essential infrastructure. The planning policy around it is very permissive, I would say, as well. So from from that perspective, there isn't a planning reason to resist this application as presented to us. Other sites, because it didn't have that specific locational need to show that it was a connection to infrastructure, that didn't overcome the Greenbelt objection. Being within a strategic employment and economic location, that didn't overcome, again, planning policy positions that existed for those BES facilities. This one here, there isn't a planning policy position that would mitigate against it. And having carried out the technical assessments and the consultation, there isn't any other material consideration that would stand against this proposal either. That's why it's brought to committee today with the recommendation for approval. In terms of guidance, waiting from the Scottish Government, there is ongoing work from the Scottish Government around this. As I say, the policy position we get just now is that, that this is essential infrastructure and the planning authorities seek to encourage it. But the Scottish Government has indicated that they will produce some additional guidance around it. But as it stands just now, this proposal complies with our policies and there isn't a material consideration that would mitigate against it.
Yeah, sorry, Fraser. In relationship to housing, do we have guidelines as to how far that should be away from it? Have we looked into, quite bluntly, the dangers? Although it's completely different, we keep hearing electric cars blowing up, and these are slightly bigger batteries.
It's submit a sort of fire management plan around it. They will say they will engage with the Scottish Fire and Rescue in terms of the implementation and the delivery of the programme. Issues around how the site is managed were matters that would be affected through other legislation. It'd be more health and safety legislation as opposed to a planning consideration. So in that respect, there hasn't, the proximity to houses isn't necessarily a planning consideration on this, but if there was a material consideration that came out in terms of an objection from a statutory body, that is something we would take on board, but we haven't had any objections.
So, sorry, just to put that into my language, because fire and safety haven't objected, there's not a planning issue.
Councillor Ross Lambie, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think Fraser just answered my question. I was just double checking that there's no objections being received because it says none in the paper. It's just what Councillor Barker was suggesting. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Watson and then Councillor Clark, and we'll come back to Councillor Barker.
Thanks, Chair. I think Fraser alluded to a bit of this. I think it's totally not right that Scottish Government expect local authorities to be dealing with these when there's no real national strategy on it other than that they want these built. These have come up time and time again recently, and there's just no direction in what the national policy is regarding where it's a suitable site for these type of facilities to be located. But turning to this one, and I note in the report it says there's a fire report being completed. At first I assumed that was maybe by the Scottish Fire and Rescue, but actually when you drill down into it, it wasn't. It was the applicant or somebody on behalf of the applicant. And it's disappointing that in that report it says that Muirhall Energy approached Scottish Fire Service by email, but no site-specific comments were provided. Maybe we should be getting reports from Scottish Fire and Rescue and these type of things as well, because the reality is it is an unknown. We have seen, or I have certainly seen videos of battery storage facilities going in fire. There was one quite recently in America, and it was quite a substantial fire. So there are risks associated with this, and we need to make sure that we're getting the best and the right information. But further on in that report, and I'm just trying to find it, it basically just says that they will consult with Scottish Fire and Rescue in the future, but there's no guarantee in that, and I think we need to get guarantees that when we're approving these type of things, that Scottish Fire and Rescue are satisfied that they can reach these facilities and can service any fire that's likely to be coming from them. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Fraser, do you want to say none, or you just want to happy just to note the comments? Okay. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would support those comments around Scottish Fire and Rescue. Although in terms of the application itself, I would note, as has been explained, there's not a material planning reason that I can find or anyone can find to refuse it. Although, if there are legitimate concerns about, information in the report and the accuracy of what's being displayed, then I think that would be more grounds for deferring it. So, just to ask Fraser, so you're confident that everything in this report is, accurately presented and gives us the ideal picture of the application, and that the concerns raised around the location and so on wouldn't change the outcome. Just so we were very confident in approving this since concerns have been raised, and it wouldn't be worth going back to the applicant to clarify some of these points.
Yeah, no, thanks, Councillor. No, we do recognise in terms of the representations been made by the sort of local residents, and we've taken, we assess them, we assess that against the existing planning policies, we assess it and challenge the submissions that are made to us by applicants as well. But at the end of it, we have to make an assessment in terms of planning policy, material considerations, and issues that are within the gift of the planning authority to lead to a recommendation. I'm comfortable in terms of the assessment that we've carried out is accurate and consistent with the existing planning policies that we have to apply, and that the recommendation that we have here is acceptable in planning grounds, and that's why I'm happy to present it to the members of the committee today.
Thank you, Fraser. Okay, I'll bring the matter to a conclusion, and I'm going to ask if there's anybody willing to second Ralph Barker before I come to his reasons. Councillor Barker, you do not have a seconder. Therefore, my recommendation is then to grant. Sorry, Councillor David Shearer.
I'm happy to second Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Councillor David Shearer. Councillor Barker, can I come to you and ask for your planning reason for the refusal, please, in planning terms?
My planning reasons is that 50 metres from the nearest residential property is too close for this type of installation. Beyond that, planning is about choices. The applicant has tried to camouflage just where the batteries will be. And again, if we look at the drawing which was provided to this committee, it shows two sections. And where the batteries go is the section closest to the houses. If anybody looks at that drawing, which, well, I don't know about setting a precedent, but 50 metres must be too close, and it is up to this committee to decide that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Shearer, are you still happy to second that from Councillor Barker?
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to second that, given that there's very little guidance on how far these batteries should be from residential properties. It's up to the committee to make a decision, and 50 metres would seem to me to be far too close.
Thank you, Councillor Shearer. Therefore, my recommendation is to go with the paper, and that is to grant subject to the conditions.
I'll second it.
We will then move to the vote. I'll ask Stuart just to summarise, and then we will move to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. So just to recap, the motion is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions detailed in the report as proposed by Councillor Nelson and seconded by Councillor Convery. The amendment is to refuse planning permission on the grounds that the site is 50 metres from the nearest residential property, which is too close, being proposed by Councillor Barker and seconded by Councillor Shearer. The vote has now been activated. I would ask members if you could please indicate your voting preference. Thank you. Thank you. All members have now indicated their voting preference. I'm now stopping the vote. The 14 members have voted in favour of the motion and 9 have voted in favour of the amendment. I therefore declare the motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will then move now to agenda item number 6, please. Agenda item number 6 is application P231581. These are pages 35 to 42. And that's Newton Farm and Cambus Lang. And I'll ask Fraser.
Chair, this application seeks approval for a number of matters that were set out in conditions attached to the approved master plan for the Newton Community Growth Area and relates to the final section of the residential element of the community growth area. The principle of the development is already recognised in the residential zoning of the site in the adopted South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan, and the details submitted in relation to the design, layout, landscaping and supporting infrastructure are acceptable and will suitably integrate this phase of the development with the earlier phases that have been completed or are under construction. Developer contributions have been secured via the original master plan proposals, and they will continue to be paid as the development proceeds in accordance with the formal agreements. Therefore, it is recommended that this application for matters specified in conditions should be approved.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments, please. If there are no questions or comments, the recommendation then is to discharge the conditions. I will move.
I'll second it.
Anyone otherwise minded? All agreed. Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item number 7. Is the application P231613, pages 43 to 52. And this is installation of a battery storage facility at Mutton Hill Road in Hamilton. Fraser.
Thanks, Chair. This application seeks planning consent for a battery energy storage system on a site that extends to 1.6 hectares in an area of designated greenbelt to the southwest of Hamilton. The application site is currently an agricultural field but is adjacent to the Straven electricity substation, which the applicant has indicated is where electricity would be discharged to contribute to the stability of the electricity supply. The application has not been subject to any objections, and when assessed against the relevant local and national planning policies, it is considered that the proposal is acceptable. In this respect, unlike other applications that the Planning Committee have refused on greenbelt sites across South Lanarkshire, In this instance, the applicant has demonstrated a specific locational need given the connection and proximity to the substation. In addition, the application has been accompanied by information that ensures that the impact on the greenbelt will be acceptable, and therefore, in conclusion, it's considered that subject to the conditions set out on pages 49, 50 and 51, the planning permission should be approved for application P231613.
Thank you. Councillor Ross Lambie, please.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Fraser, again. It's slightly repetitive, but I guess it's a separate application, so it's worth repeating it again. I welcome the fact that it's adjacent to an existing large substation, and that I understand now that, because we're learning with these battery applications, I understand now that the justification for developing the green belt and classing it as essential infrastructure is because of its adjacency, its geographic adjacency to other large national infrastructure that it's going to work in tandem with. I think that's quite a useful and clear precedent for us as panel members to get our heads around, which is great. The only other thing that's interesting about this one is that it's, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's 49.9 megawatts, which is, I think, anything 50 and above doesn't come through us as a council. It goes to the ECU and gets decided in Edinburgh. So it seems to me that when the developer has confidence that it's in a sound and logical location, they're comfortable to come through the local planning system and pay a lot less fees, and it's also a lot quicker. I just thought that was interesting to point out. Thanks.
Thanks, Ross. I think your points are relatively competent, and I think we'll take note of these going forward, and I think you're right, it is a learning curve for us all within the planning committee as members. Councillor Mary Donnelly, please.
Just to echo the comments that have been made previously and welcome the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor David Watson, please.
Just a follow-up on Councillor Lambie's point, and if this developer decided to expand it to over 50 megawatts at some stage, what would be the process for them doing that? Because just now this is getting determined here, but as Councillor Lambie says, if it was up over 50 rather than 49.9, it would need to go to the Scottish Government for a decision. Thanks.
I'm sorry. Fraser, do you want to come back in on that for Councillor Watson?
It's a fairly hypothetical question, that, Councillor Watson. It depends on how they would extend the facility. There are different circumstances that we could be the planning authority, could be the Scottish Government on that one. So it would really depend on the type of proposal that they come forward with. So I'm not trying to duck the question, but I kind of know that the answer is it depends on what they come back to us with.
Councillor Watson.
Thanks for that, Fraser, and I suspected it was something like that, but surely this is something we need to take up again with the Scottish Government, that if developers want to game the system to an extent, that they could go in for smaller sites and then expand them without having to go through the full process with the Scottish Government. We need to maybe lock that down at some point as part of the ongoing discussions you've got with the Government.
That's fine, Councillor Watson. Fraser will take that forward with discussions. Sorry, Councillor Shearer, I think I pressed a button and you popped up on screen, so Councillor Shearer.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. Fraser mentioned that this was the correct site for this battery storage, and it was justified by its proximity to the existing substation. So I'm a bit more inclined to accept it. However, given that it would appear from the map to be right next to residential buildings, I'm assuming that's a residential building on the map next to it, can Fraser tell me what mitigation has been recommended to protect that residential development?
Fraser, can you comment on that, please?
The residential property next is actually the landowner. And that's in terms of, that's the person that's leasing the land to, the energy operator. There isn't any, conditions that are set against this application in terms of the use of, the facility, because again, that wouldn't come in as a planning consideration. But that being the case, it's the proposal is considered as the essential infrastructure that does have the specific locational need that makes it appropriate within the Greenbelt.
So has the fire and safety people not recommended any conditions to be placed on that? No. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Shearer. Any further questions or comments then, please? If there are no further questions or comments, then the recommendation is to grant subject to the conditions. I will move to grant.
I'll second.
Thank you. Anyone otherwise minded? Thank you. Agenda item number 8 then, please, is application P240808. These are on pages 53 to 62. And that's erection of 6 dwelling flats and associated infrastructure, Wilkie Road in Uddingston. Fraser?
Thanks, Chair. This application relates to a site in Uddingston that was subject to a previous consent that has subsequently expired. The application seeks consent for 6 flats in a 3.5-storey block that would front onto Wilkie Road. No objections were submitted by statutory consultees, but 8 letters of objection were submitted by residents in the near vicinity, and the details of the comments are summarised in section 7. On the whole, though, it's considered that the proposal is acceptable on planning policy terms, and while the properties will be 3.5 storeys in height, this will not in itself be detrimental to the streetscape of the area. And following a shadow analysis, it is noted that the proposals are acceptable in terms of the impact on neighbouring properties. Therefore, subject to the conditions in section 11, and for the reasons stated in section 12 of the report, it is recommended that application P240808 should be approved.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments. Councillor Dempsey.
In general, I always support new housing. Uddingston's not get the greatest amount of housing. I am, however, worried for the people who will eventually live in these properties, because I already have a lot of casework from people living on Coburn Park and Oakbank Crescent regarding noise from the adjacent Thistle Seafoods facility. I wonder, therefore, the complaints are around noise, and effectively, because the factory was there first, it's down to the houses to mitigate any noise complaints through the night. I wonder, therefore, whether it would be appropriate to include a further condition regarding the soundproofing in these houses, things like double glazing or acoustic insulation. I'd like to hear officers' comments on that. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. No, it's Environmental Services were consulted on the proposal, and a noise impact assessment was submitted as part of the application. There's also a series of informatives that will be added to the consent, if approved, which will be regarding those sort of the issues around construction noise, pests, contamination and the like as well. This is to ensure that the provision of the sort of amenities, the amenity of the residents that come into these properties is protected. But certainly Environmental Services were happy and comfortable with the noise impact assessment that had been provided as part of the application.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? If there are no further questions or comments, then the recommendation then is to grant subject to conditions. I will move.
I'll second it.
All agreed. Thank you. Agenda item number 9. I'm going to ask Councillor Mary Donnelly just to leave the meeting. She has registered her interest. Agenda item number 9 then is application P241038, pages 63 to 70 in your pack. This is a change of use of after-school care facility to retail and associated alterations at 20 Argyle Drive in Hamilton. And I'll ask Fraser to present.
Chair, this application relates to a site within the general urban area of Hamilton, and planning permission was previously refused under application P212167 for the change of use to a retail unit, and this decision was upheld via an appeal that was submitted to the Department of Planning and Environmental Appeals. This current application involves the removal of the pedestrian barrier to the front of the building to allow delivery vans to access the unit, while bollards are proposed to discourage parking. However, assessing the new proposals within the context of the previous decision taken by the Planning Committee and the decision issued by the Scottish Government reporter, it is considered that this proposed change of use remains unacceptable in planning terms. The same considerations around amenity, public safety and detrimental impact on access still exist, and the decision of the reporter and the Planning Committee are material considerations that need to be taken into consideration in the assessment of this application. So therefore, for the reasons set out in section 11 of the report presented to members, it is recommended that the planning application to change the use of 20 Argyll Drive to a retail unit should be refused.
Thank you. I'll open up for any questions or comments, please. Councillor David McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chair. I remember when this was refused before, and I was aware it went to appeal. I wonder if there's anything different in this application. I don't have the previous application to hand, but I wonder if there's anything different in this application that would suggest that the applicant might be successful this time around. Is there any material change or anything that's different at all from was previously refused and the appeal refused?
Yeah, Councillor, no, they initially sought to make some changes to the sort of traffic calming in the area. There was alterations to the lay-by and the bollards. From our assessment of it and from the consideration that was taken by the reporters unit as well as the planning committee, we don't feel as if these changes do change the recommendation previously. We certainly can never prejudge the outcome of an appeal if it goes to that, but we're comfortable that the recommendation here to refuse is appropriate because there hasn't been a change in circumstance since the previous refusal.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? If there are no further questions or comments, then the recommendation is to refuse the application. I will recommend that we refuse.
I'll second it.
All agreed. I'll invite Councillor Mary Donnelly back into the meeting. You can just bear with us. Okay, agenda item number 10, since Councillor Mary Donnelly is back in the meeting, is application P241149. These are on pages 71 to 82. And this is the installation of underground electrical cable for the substation Elvenfoot via Abington and Lead Hills. And I'll ask Fraser to present, please.
Thanks, Chair. This application seeks to connect the Preskill wind farm to Elvenfoot substation via some 4.5 kilometres of underground cabling and associated infrastructure. And this is to support further works to erect overhead lines that have been approved by the Scottish Government's Energy Consent Unit. The scale of this development is such that there is a major application and therefore needs to be presented to the Planning Committee, but no objections have been submitted and there are no outstanding policy or material considerations that would lead to a recommendation other than approval for this application. A number of conditions are suggested to be attached to the consent, and these are set out in section 11 of the report. But with these and for the reasons set out in section 12, it is recommended that application P241149 should be approved.
Thank you. I'll open up for questions or comments. Councillor Alec Allison, please.
Chair, 2.2 Fraser, it's saying that the cabling where it runs through Abington. Can you maybe expand on that a little bit?
I'll ask the Rog just to come in.
Thanks, Councillor. Yes, that's right. The cable will run underneath the public road through Abington. At the moment, it's a private apparatus, but we are making agreements to make sure that both the installation of the cable and going in perpetuity, the cable will be essentially maintained by another company. So we've been working in the background under roads legislation to ensure there'll be no issues with that.
Thank you, Fraser. Councillor Allison?
Yeah, seems a bit extreme coming down the high street when there's plenty of land round about. Has any other alternative been looked at? Or is it simply we just deal with what we've got in front of us?
Okay. Fraser, do you want to just come back in on that quickly?
Yeah, I mean, we've looked at it just as what's been put in front of us, but normally cables would sort of run under the ground with other sort of utilities along public roads. So.
Yeah, sorry. So if it does go down there, can you ensure that the road is reinstated in a lasting manner? Because quite often we see these are fine at the time.
Thank you, Councillor Allison. We'll make sure that's noted in the minutes as an agreement. Any further questions or comments? No further questions or comments then. Sorry, Councillor Barker.
Right, thank you, Chair. Because this is part of the rather contrived project that we just discussed in the BESS at Elvenfoot. The applicant has not been able to find an easier way than digging up the complete main road through Abington. This is going to cause a lot of issues. I wondered if there is any community benefit from this. What I would say is, I mean, once it is installed, it shouldn't be any further. It should not be any further problem to the residents. But it's installation, and I really wonder if this will ever be if it ever will come to installation, given the practical problems. However, perhaps you could say, is there any benefit to the residents who will be quite clearly, life and business in Abington will be disrupted. Thank you.
Fraser, can I just ask you to comment, please?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. The overall wind farm proposal, no, there was a range of community benefits that would have come on the back of that consent. This is seen as supporting infrastructure around it. One thing I would point to was condition number 5, which does require a survey of the road in advance of that. It then does require final surveys to be provided, and picking up on Councillor Allison's point, ensuring that the road is actually repaired and replaced to an acceptable standard. There will be a period of disruption in terms of the implementation of what is seen as essential infrastructure. It will be important that the contractors and the companies that are actually involved in delivering this work, they're engaging with communities so that they're aware of likely disruption that may take place. Unfortunately, I think with an application of this scale and size, it's a consequence that comes on the back of it. But what we want to make sure here, through the planning conditions as well as with the engagement of the road services, that there is no lasting impact on the road within that area, that there is no lasting impact on the residents within the area there. And hopefully the community benefits that are gained through that overall planning application bring some sort of socio-economic benefits to the communities within the area that are affected by the wind farm as well. So this would be seen as essential infrastructure as part of that overall scheme.
Thank you. Just could make the comment, and it's not really a planning comment. There'll be general community benefit from the wind farm itself, and that will be spread over a huge area, whereas the real disruption will be just to villages in Abington. But just make that point, it's a kind of a failing in the way that community benefit is dealt with. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Comments are noted. Councillor Allison?
Just thinking this through again, I mean, if they're going to be putting a cable down the middle of the main street, that street will be closed when they're doing that. Have to be, because any other time you're doing work, you're closing these rural roads. I'm not aware of what the diversion route's going to be, because there are, that's going to be reasonable at all. Is there? Have you looked at that either, Fraser, or not?
Matters that have to be picked up through the conditions that are attached. There's pre-commencement conditions that are attached to this. As Fraser had mentioned, there's ongoing discussions with the Roads Authority regarding the impact, and we would seek to minimise it at every opportunity. They would have to make sure that there is, in terms of the disruption, that there's alternative methods, for whether it's getting through the village or getting by the village. So those are matters that can be covered through these conditions, and we would need to be discussed with the contractors once they're in place. But again, it's that a degree of disruption is inevitable with the development of this scale around that, and we would seek to minimise that.
Can we ask them to come back with that diversion plan, if you like, a road management plan, before they commence work? No, to the committee, not to the authority, to the committee.
Yeah. I would be inclined to think that's not necessarily a decision that could be made around that, because it's information that needs to come back. There can be, we can ask the applicants to engage with the community in terms of what's the likely impact around that. We can ask them for making sure that there's information that's provided to you as elected members on that. As an actual decision to come back, or a recommendation to come back to this committee on it, it would be a quite an unusual request that would be inclined to think about it. Recognising that there is a concern, and I think it's that, it's the publicity, consultation, engagement around that. We will certainly impress that onto the applicants through planning as well as through with the roads service around that. And it may be that it'd be something that would be subject to further updates to you as local members. I would be inclined to think, and I would without necessarily wanting to put words in the developer, they will want to engage and make sure that they minimise the sort of negative publicity around this as well. So they would be engaging with the local community groups around this one as well.
Thank you, Fraser. I think it's quite evident to see that there's some concerns from local members in the committee today. So I think going forward, to have that work done with the developer, the people who are carrying out this work, to keep in regular contact with the local elected members of that area. I think we'll take note of that's part of what we've discussed here this morning, and the hope that the disruption to the local community is done as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So I think going forward, Councillor Allison, I think we all know that there'll be some disruption to the local community, and I think between Roads and the Planning Authority, I'm sure they'll keep a good eye on that. The two Frasers will do that for us. Everyone happy with that then? If so, I'll recommend then that we grant subject to the conditions.
I'll second it, Chair.
All agreed? Thank you. Agenda item number 11 then is application P241171. These on pages 83 to 90. It's a demolition of a detached garage, alteration, land engineering operations, including retaining walls and erection of a 4-bed detached house at 24 Covenburn Avenue in Hamilton. Fraser?
Thanks, Chair. This application relates to a cul-de-sac street in Silverton Hill in Hamilton. And planning consent was previously refused for a dwelling at this site, but this application has amended the scheme, and it now seeks consent for a smaller footprint, and in doing so it is considered that the scheme complies with the development management policies in the adopted South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan. 9 letters of objection from 6 neighbouring households have been submitted against the proposals, but it's considered that the issues raised when assessed against the details submitted would not bring this proposal into conflict with the relevant planning consideration. So therefore, subject to the conditions set out in section 11 of the report that's presented to members, it's recommended that application P241171 should be approved.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments, please. Councillor John Ross.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. This proposal lies within my ward area. I didn't declare an interest initially simply because I haven't been in contact with the applicants. However, I did receive a letter, as probably did planning, outlining the fact that a previous application had been refused in March 24. And looking at the considerations put into planning, there seems to be very little reason why this should now be up for granting rather than refusal. And I'm not sure, the very last item was to do with the few. Now, I don't know whether this comes under planning permission, but the title deed for that particular piece of ground says, "It shall not be lawful nor in the power of the fewer to subdivide the ground hereby fewed or sell or dispose of any part thereof." Now, I'm not sure whether that comes in to a planning decision or not, but it would appear from the other points raised by the residents, there seems to be very little reason for now granting this. And I was wondering if Fraser could possibly come back to me and give me some idea. One, if these have been looked at in detail, and give me some reason why, when there's very little change, why we're now recommending granting instead of refusal. Thanks.
Fraser?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. No, I think as suggested there, is the house that's now presented to us, the dwelling that's now presented, is a smaller footprint. In terms of the layout of the site, in terms of the parking, the access to it, it meets the requirements that we would seek from a new development. So they've almost taken on board, or they have taken on board, the reasons for refusal that were given to the previous application, presented this new proposal to us, and in the opinion of the planning service, it's an acceptable form of development. Regarding the ownership and few issues, that is entirely a civil matter. No, if the owners don't have the right to subdivide their units, if they don't have the ownership of it, then that's a matter that they would have to seek their own legal opinion on. It's not a planning consideration. I think as a normal consideration, it's planning permission goes to an area of land and it's not the ownership. So in terms of this area of land, there are no outstanding planning objections, and the issues around whether there's former few superiors' rights or there's any restrictions on development on that that sit within title deeds, that's a matter that would need to be pursued through sort of civil legal channels as opposed to through the planning authority.
Thanks very much, Fraser. Can I just ask a wee supplementary then? The points noted, which have been sent to me, obviously they have been considered then in great detail by our planners and decided that in fact they don't warrant a refusal in this case. I'm justified in saying that.
Yep, that's correct, Councillor Ross, yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ross Lambie, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just a little bit concerned about that contribution. I mean, as committee members, we're not supposed to take cognizance of any lobbying that we receive. We're supposed to judge the application based on the material submitted and presented by the officers in the reports. And I just thought quoting other documents verbatim was inappropriate. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Lambie. I think that's for the individual councillor to decide whether they take the test themselves. It's not for me. I don't know if Councillor Ross just wants to come in and comment on that. I'll let him do so, and then I'll bring this to a conclusion.
Yeah, I would like to come back on that. I think Councillor Lambie is out of order there. As far as I was concerned, I have not been in discussion with that. This is a document that was distributed to the planning department. I'm only asking if they've considered the points raised in that. And I would be failing in my duty as a local ward councillor if I didn't put forward the points raised by residents in my area. Whether I agree with them or disagree with them is a different story entirely. And as you'll see, I haven't raised any amendment to this, and I gave the people in consideration that I would not go for or against this application, but listen to our planning officer. So I refute the comments by Councillor Lambie. I think he's out of order. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to bring that matter to a close then, and the recommendation then is to grant subject to conditions. All agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item number 12 then is application P24 1184. These are pages 91 to 98, in your pack. And that is the part change of use of building to veterinary surgery and entirely ground floor as a mix of use of a veterinary surgery on the first floor. That's at One Biggar Business Park in Biggar. Fraser.
Thanks, Chair. This application relates to a two-storey building currently used by several businesses, but the intention is to establish a veterinary surgery, which would include treatment areas, overnight staff accommodation, laboratory and ancillary office space. The applicant currently operates from premises in Biggar that they suggest they have outgrown. 41 representations were submitted in relation to the proposal, with 32 in support and 9 objections, and the details of these are summarised in section 7. No objections were received from statutory consultees, but when assessing the planning policy considerations, the determining issue is the acceptability and impact of a use that is defined as being within Class 1A of the Use Classes Scotland order, operating within what is zoned in the local development plan as a development framework site. In this respect, while a traditional retail unit would not be appropriate for this application site, the manner in which this veterinary business operates is such that a town centre location is unlikely to be practicable, and for the reasons it is considered that the proposals comply with the development framework zoning and definition. Objections to the proposal have commented on the potential loss of businesses from this building, and while this is predominantly a commercial decision for the owners of the building and leaseholders to address, it is noted that opportunities exist within vacant town centre units and on sites within the development framework site itself that could provide market-led opportunities to meet the needs of local business. So therefore, in conclusion, it is considered that subject to a condition that restricts the use of the premises to a veterinary business and details on boundary treatments, is recommended that application P24 1184 should be approved.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for questions or comments. Councillor Allison, please.
Seems to be a day for Ward 3. I don't know how to feel about this one, because it's great to see a local business needing to expand and moving into these premises. But there are 9 other businesses now that have been served notice to quit. There are no other premises that I'm aware of in Biggar, so I think the comment that there are other premises available is not at this time correct. And I think it highlights the problem we have out in the rural area, that there is not the premises available for small businesses to start and grow. And unfortunately, we've never done anything about it. So I'm betwixt and between. It's helping one business expand, which I can support, but it's very disappointing that we're maybe going to lose 9 others. One of them claiming that they were told that they just need to work out their house. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, and it's not a planning issue, but it does emphasise the feeling within these businesses that they're being hung out to dry.
Thank you, Councillor Allison. Councillor Ralph Parker, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Allison makes a point that although the explanation, the glib explanation is there are other commercial industrial areas in Biggar, but they don't appear to be available. They're not pointed out, so it's just a case of they can move somewhere else. It's a strange situation where an applicant can apply for change of use, which affects several other businesses. I mean, it's a weird situation. I mean, presumably those businesses, they can't apply for change of use back until they've got change of use. I mean, it really does not make any sense. This has been the part of Biggar which has been available for commercial and industrial, and this application will take that away. Now, I mean, I'm sorry to say it, but I would recommend refusal. Let the expanding business find somewhere else, and get a change of use. But why just accept a change of use that prevents commercial and industrial enterprises in apparently the only part of Biggar where they can continue to work? So, I mean, I would recommend, I'm sorry, I would move to refuse if I can get a seconder. Thanks very much.
We just need to clarify your reason a moment, Councillor Barker. Can I just see if there's a seconder before we come back to you, if anybody is willing to second that? Nobody's willing to second that, Councillor Barker. Therefore, I'll bring the matter to a conclusion. The recommendation is to grant subject to conditions. I will move.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Agenda item number 13 then is application P241379. These are pages 99 to 110. This is a residential development comprising 112 dwellings, Mugger landscaping and associated infrastructure. It's a variation and it's land 115 metres northwest of 52 Rickard Avenue in Straven. Fraser?
Chair, this application is made under Section 42 of the Town and Country Planning Act, and it seeks to vary a condition that was attached to consents issued under various earlier applications for this site designated for housing in Straven. The main alteration relates to the exclusion of a skate park from the landscaping of the site and its replacement with a community growing area, picnic benches and ancillary play equipment. 2 letters of objection were received against the variation of the condition, but on the whole, it is considered that this change is acceptable in planning terms and will provide an appropriate provision of play and open space to meet the needs of the residents in this development. In line with statutory requirements, all of the original conditions will continue into the new consent, which in turn will also require a revision to an existing Section 75 agreement. So therefore, subject to the successful conclusion of the Section 75, it is recommended that application to vary condition attached to planning application P220056 should be approved.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments, if you could please indicate now. If there are no questions or comments, then the recommendation is to grant subject to conditions. I will move.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All agreed. Agenda item number 14. There are no items of urgent business today. Therefore, can I ask the clerk to stop the recording of the meeting? Wish you all an enjoyable day and thank you very much.
Well done.